It's probably trauma. So just bless it and allow it to move away from you. Just relax. Enjoy the peacefulness of this sanctuary. This place where you can feel the prayers and you can feel the love. If something comes to your mind, just go back to your breath. Breathing in and breathing out. God is, I am. God is, I am. God is, I am. That I am is your Christ consciousness. So travel from your head to your heart, and then from your heart down to the pit of your stomach, that sacred sacral area. Allow the vibrations of prayer and love to come into you. Comes in through the breath. God is, I am. God is, I am. God is, I am. And as we take this in to that sacred sacral area, we take it in, and let's enter in to a few moments of silence. And as we come back to the here and to the now, we come back knowing our divinity. We come back infused with faith and love. When you're ready, you can gently open your eyes and come on back. I could stay in meditation all day. It's such a day. You know, I was looking for something fresh, but I wanted it to be something light. So, you like Pee Wee Herman on his bike with no triangle? I found all kinds of memes yesterday that kind of go along with my talk. But I was reading the works of Reverend Jude Denning. And she actually did a lot of my life work for this talk. Some of it is me, but some of it might be Jude. So I want to, Reverend Jude. So I want to give her props. I want to talk about the transformational teachings of the Wizard of Oz, the story of that cute little Dorothy and her little dog too. It's a great story. And today, as we explore this teaching as it relates to Unity members and Unity principles, I ask you, as we're going along, to see if you can identify with any of the characters or themes in our story. The story is as old as time. It's the story of a quest to find treasure. Well, everybody likes to find treasure. Joseph Campbell identified it as a hero's journey. As all heroes' journeys go, it begins with a divine discontent and ends with a return home. Along the way, there are obstacles and challenges, allies and enemies, just because we wear nice shoes. And there's remembering that needs to happen. It's a tale of all our lives. As a young girl, I can remember this movie coming on TV on what my mom liked to call Chips and Pop Night. It was usually a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday night, and Chips and Pop Night, it sounds very deceiving, because before you could have your bowl of chips and your pop, back in Michigan we call it pop, we don't call it soda, we had to line up for a huge tablespoon of something called Castoria. This black vial elixir was supposed to keep our poop schedules regular. My mother was an evil genius, disguising treat night with her own twisted health agenda. Anyway, one of my first memories was seeing the witch and the flying monkeys. Monkeys are bad enough, but these guys were green and they flew, and I had to hide my eyes until they were gone and the scene ended. I would have pooped my pants, but the Castoria hadn't kicked in yet. So we begin with the black and white, the ordinary world in a place called Kansas. Dorothy is supposedly 12. Do you remember 12? Before the hormones kicked in. Half woman, half child. She's dependent on her aunt and uncle, and yet she yearns for her independence, her vision quest, her awakening. Every character in the story is an aspect of us. So Toto, this omniscient observer and troublemaker, has run into Elmira Gulch's garden, and Dorothy is upset because Elmira threatened Toto, but Uncle Henry and Auntie Em were too busy worried about saving some chicks from a broken incubator. And Dorothy is appalled that they don't seem to care about her problem. Now on a farm, chicks dying is earth-shattering, and a 12-year-old's problems with her dog and the town bully are just not big on the priority list. So Dorothy sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow to convey her discontent and her yearning to be someplace else. You know, that better place that exists in our minds when we have problems. Don't you ever think about it? Just me? At this time, Elmira Gulch shows up and she bullies Auntie Em and Uncle Henry to allow her to take that vicious beast known as Toto to the sheriff to get her justice. Dorothy reacts as any preteen, and she goes to her room to cry it out. And Toto, cunning and masterful, escapes out of the basket, and he runs home to be reunited with Dorothy. Toto comes from the Latin word totum, meaning whole, and it tells us that we must listen to our inner Toto, our intuition, which is rooted in wholeness. Now, just a few observations about Toto. Dorothy talks directly to Toto, and I don't think that's a weird thing, because I talk directly to my 3 dogs. But could he represent her inner and intuitive self? After all, Toto was intuitive. He knew something was up with that scarecrow. He barked at him. He also barked at the little man behind the curtain and revealed that the wizard was a fraud. And Toto escaped several times. The lesson? Listen to Toto within. Toto is gifted with keen intuition. So now there's this huge twister coming, and Dorothy's left the bed to run away with Toto, and she encounters Professor Marvel, who through kindness and trickery gets Dorothy to go home before the twister hits. Dorothy Gale is about to experience a gale of a storm. I never got the Dorothy Gale, that it was a gale. Did you guys? I didn't get that. And then the twister hits. Have you ever had a twister in your life? It's a frightening force that crosses your path and makes us wake up. Spiritually, we hear the call of spirit, and we begin to shift ourselves away from that twister. Here's the secret. The twister is manifested by Dorothy because of her inner struggle for self-awareness. And we all know self-awareness can be a little scary sometimes. Dorothy's been displaying the law of mind action, as we all do. The law of mind action is Unity's 3rd principles, which says that we create our lives and our world by what we hold in our mind. Dorothy's reaping the fruits of her chaotic thoughts and her choices. She's been reactive and impulsive, she's been self-absorbed, and she's exercised questionable choices. And now she's in big trouble. There's a book called Zen of the Wizard of Oz. Who knew? If you get caught in a cyclone because you ran away from home to save your dog from being destroyed by the sheriff, because you let your dog run through a mean old lady's garden, you just might want to stop and ask yourself, what is the universe trying to tell me? Take that in. And so we're called to pay attention to our divine discontent and take conscious steps to transform our lives in the hero's journey. There's a point when a threshold must be crossed. And it's here that Dorothy literally steps across the threshold, leaving behind her ordinary Kansas City life and stepping into a whole new life in Munchkin Land. And it's in Kansas anymore. These are Dorothy's first words after she steps out into Munchkin Land. Many of us have had that feeling, haven't we? When I first came to California, I was like, we're not in Kansas anymore. Toto, as I was telling myself. Perhaps we've experienced twisters or gales in our lives, and as we move through a new landscape, we realize life will never be the same. Indeed, Dorothy and Toto are not in Kansas anymore. And at this point in the story, she could think that all of her problems are solved. After all, she escaped Elmira Gulch. Toto is safely in her arms, and she's in this beautiful place. What could possibly go wrong? Our poor little Dorothy has yet to realize that she will face the same bigger trials in this new life as she faced in her old life. Many of us can identify with this. We want a certain life filled with love and ease and grace. And yet we go through life making unconscious choices. We unnecessarily walk past Miss Gulch's house, running away from our problems, and we get catapulted over the rainbow to face those same problems in another form. Now, as Dorothy steps out into Munchkin Land, to the giggles of the unknown Munchkins, she encounters Glinda, the Good Witch. Just a word on the Munchkins. You know, there are small parts of us that make up the whole, and each part is important. Whether those parts are the Lollipop Guild or the Lullaby League, each is important to the whole. Now, Glinda the Good Witch in this story is kind of like Reverend Tony Bain to me. She's Dorothy's mentor. And she guides Dorothy and coaches her in her own unique way, just like Reverend Tony is with me. As she meets the Munchkins who are friendly to her, and then all of a sudden, an enemy appears. The Wicked Witch of the West flies in, wanting to know who killed her sister. And Dorothy tries to explain to her. She says, I think the house fell on her. It was an accident. And then we find out that the Wicked Witch really wants the red ruby slippers that Glinda has put on Dorothy's feet. Now, the ruby slippers are the spark of Dorothy's divinity, and the Wicked Witch wants their power. So Dorothy asks Glinda, the Good Witch, how do I get back to Kansas? I can't go the way I came. And Glinda responds, like any good coach or mentor, it's always better to start at the beginning. All you have to do is follow the yellow brick road. Now, just in case you haven't figured it out, the yellow brick road represents our unique spiritual journey. Metaphysically speaking, following our yellow brick road is following our true nature, our divine essence, our divinity. And where do we begin? We always begin at the beginning, right here where we are right now. We can never go back the way we came. Now, one of my favorite parts in the story is after Glinda tells Dorothy to follow the yellow brick road, Dorothy says, what happens if? I imagine completing Dorothy's sentence. What happens if I get lost? What happens if the wizard won't see me? What happens if the witch comes along my way? What happens to me, and Toto too? For us, it might be, what happens if I lose my job? What happens if I get sick or my relationship ends? Just follow the yellow brick road. Follow your divine nature. And even as we follow our divine nature, guess what? There is no guarantee that sometimes we will not sometimes get afraid or confused. We will come upon forks in the road where a decision must be made as to which direction to go. So Dorothy begins to follow the yellow brick road, and at a fork in the road, she meets an unlikely ally. She meets the Scarecrow. Toto knows he's special. He barks at her, just like my dog Al barks at everybody. Dorothy called upon wisdom in the guise of a scarecrow. And then the decision is easy to make which way to go. In fact, she never refers to it again. Once the scarecrow, wisdom, was released, she makes a choice and she takes her steps. It really doesn't matter which way she goes anyway. It doesn't matter which way we go as long as we follow our divine nature. All roads lead to illumination if we let them. The truth is we never travel alone, just like Dorothy. Our passion for our spiritual journey is contagious. Look around you today. Look at each other. See, you've all attracted allies. All these like-minded people. And I bet you've attracted and inspired other people in your life too. just by shining your light. The next ally that Dorothy comes upon is the Tin Man. He says to Dorothy, "Bang on my chest if you think I'm perfect. The tinsmith forgot to give me a heart." The Tin Man represents the gift of an open heart, love and compassion, but he doesn't even see his own gifts yet. When the Tin Man asks Dorothy to bang on his chest, he's really showing her his vulnerability. He's showing her that he feels he's missing something. His vulnerability is his strength. The Tin Man within each of us teaches us to show our heart, show our love, and to show our vulnerability. Yeah, sometimes we feel empty inside. We don't think we have a heart. But just as we can see in the Tin Man, he has a huge heart, and yet he feels empty. We don't see that in our world. The world tells us over and over again that our success depends on being better, stronger, smarter than another. To be successful, we must be ruthless competitors. To the extent that we buy into that philosophy, our heart closes. If we buy in a little bit, our heart closes a little bit. If we buy into it a lot, our heart closes a lot. Many people who are reasonably conscious and are aware that there's an emptiness in many human beings' hearts, something that the writer Anne Lamott calls a God-sized hole. We yearn for connection with spirit, and when we don't feel connected, we go looking outside ourselves for something to fill us, material things, somebody else's love or approval. It is love expressed that brings wholeness to the Tin Man. Likewise, when we give love away, we're filled up again. When we give love away, it expands and increases, even through the ordeals and the drama of our life. And now in the story, Dorothy, the Scarecrow, and the Tin Man continue on their journey, and the group meets the lion. The lion doesn't think he's brave, but in the end, the lion always acts bravely. He's got courage. Sometimes we don't think we're brave, but time and time again, we have the courage to act bravely. Now in the story, Dorothy and her three friends, and of course that little troublemaker Toto, move on. And they encounter trees throwing apples at them, getting knocked unconscious in the poppy field. And then they come to the stage of the hero's journey called the approach to the inmost cave. The approach encompasses all the final preparations of the ordeal. It brings the hero to the stronghold of opposition, where she now needs to use every lesson that she's ever learned. Dorothy and Toto are captured by the Wicked Witch, and it's here that the Wicked Witch tells the flying monkeys, those dang flying monkeys, to drown Toto. Dorothy gives up on the idea of returning home. She surrenders. Those darn flying monkeys. They're heavy in this scene. Dorothy knows that the ruby slippers are the only things keeping her safe. Yet, in the face of Toto's destruction, she's willing to surrender the slippers and any chance she has in her mind of returning to Kansas. She risks everything for someone she loves. She tells the witch she can take the slippers, even though it means she'll be forever at the witch's mercy. Dorothy surrenders the slippers and she lays down her human desire to return to Kansas in favor of a higher calling, love. And that's when she and all of us are reminded that there's a higher power in charge. The ruby slippers don't come off. No one can take our divine essence from us. We can't even surrender it willingly. We can forget for a while. We can forget our innate divinity, our Christ nature. We can and do forget that there is no separation. But as we consciously walk the path of the hero, we'll be reminded that there is no separation, and no one can take our good from us. So once again, that scamp Toto escapes from the basket and finds the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man, leads them back to the castle to rescue Dorothy. By the way, we're at the part of the story where the witch melts and says, "I'm melting," after the water is thrown at her. Click. Other way. I'm melting. She dissolves. And now in the story, the group enters the beloved Emerald City to see the great and powerful Oz, the wizard. Now Toto's the hero in the story here too, because he barks at the wizard behind the curtain and shows the wizard to be a fraud. So many times we go out of ourselves looking for validation, looking for somebody to save us when we encounter frauds. Even though the man behind the curtain did not have ill intentions, he defrauded the group just the same. So this guy who just perpetrated that fraud on the bunch decides, well, they're going to get in this big hot air balloon. And when you think of the hot air balloon, you think rise above it. It looks like Dorothy will be rising above in a balloon. But it's that last minute, Toto, that darn Toto, runs away and she misses her ascension. She then has to rely on her divine essence, the red ruby slippers, and find her way home through her Christ consciousness. Here's when the mentor shows up, just in time, because Glinda the Good Witch comes back. And in the end, she tells Dorothy, "You've had the power all along." Like she couldn't have told her that at the beginning, because then we wouldn't have had the whole hero's journey. After Dorothy does the affirmation 3 times, she is finally transported to her divinity, to her home. Dorothy wakes up in her own bedroom, her own resurrection of sorts, and she returns with this nugget, with this little elixir. There is no place like home. So today, just like Dorothy, be your own hero. Just like Toto, be intuitive. Be Glinda that helps and mentors others. Be like the wizard and admit it when you're a fraud and try to do your best to correct it. Be brave like the lion, be heart-filled like the Tin Man, and be wise like the Scarecrow. Most of all, make your own story and be your own hero. Namaste.
Namaste.